It's Basement Politics with Freddy Vazquez. Tonight's guest, Ron Matten, Republican candidate for Yonkers City Council president, going against the incumbent MIKE KHADER. New challenger, Laskisha Collins Bellamy. Join me in welcoming Ron tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to bring him in now. Ron, how you doing? Let me get your photo there. How you doing, Ron? Good evening.
Good, Fred. How are you?
Good, good. Can you hear me good? Are we good?
I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. So, good evening, Ron. I actually met you this evening. Oh, actually this afternoon for the first time. No, second time,
no,
actually.
we met a couple of times. We met at the debate.
Yeah, we met at the debate. I think that was the first time actually we met.
And then a mutual friend brought a group together at Phillipsy Manor.
Oh, right. Yeah, yes. Okay. I do recall that.
I think you were sitting kind of at the head of the table. It's back when we were all masked.
Yeah, well, I was no head of anything at that time, and I still aren't, but I know you are. You're wanting to be the head of the city council, right? You're running for city council president here in Yonkers, on the Republican ticket, right? Not many Republicans challenging the Democrats in the elections here, are there?
Anthony Moranti is the incumbent in the 6th district. Yonkers proper, I think it's just Anthony and I who are running in the city. Right. Jimmy Nolan is running
in the county side. Right. But it seems like the primaries are a big deal. And we'll get into that a little bit, but I was just, happy to have a Republican on. I've been having a string of Democrats, but I'm happy to have you on. And so welcome tonight. Welcome to Basement Politics with me, Freddy Vazquez. Like I said, we spoke earlier today. We were at an event where you were, kind of discussing who you were. There were several other candidates there. But before we get into that, like I mentioned to you before, I think today earlier, I liked what you had to say. You always talk about being an analytical guy. Very, process the data. And when you spoke, I like what you had to say. I did. So just give us a little bit of your background first before you go. I know you were born in Manhattan. You moved to Yonkers when you were 10.
Actually, no, I was born in Manhattan proper. My parents, I think at the time, lived in Boynton Avenue in the Bronx. They moved actually to Yonkers, Remsen Road, which is not far from where I currently live. And moved back to the Bronx for a few years. And then when I was about 15, we moved to Valentine Lane.
Okay.
15, I'm sorry, 12. When I was 12, we moved to Valentine Lane, just off of Riverdale Avenue in Valentine on that corner. And lived there until I didn't.
Right. You mentioned your mom was a European immigrant. Is that correct?
Yeah, my mom was German. She grew up, she was born in 1928. So, until you go back and read about that era, she lived a tough life. She was an East German. Her father was a communist. And because of such, she and my uncle were not allowed to attend school. My grandfather, her father disappeared during the war. She escaped East Germany as the Russians were coming in.
Oh, wow.
They wound up in a little Bavarian town called Wallesdorf, which is part of the Black Forest. And they didn't have much. I went over there 1 year with her and met her cousins, and they talked about, how little they had. Her fiance had passed away. She wound up in Munich. Her fiance had passed away. Her mother had passed away. And then she wound up coming over here as a refugee, really with just the clothes on her back.
Wow. So she went through a lot just to get here.
Yeah.
She went through a lot to be able to give you the opportunity that you had in this country, right? To be successful. And you're, I guess, first generation. Well, your dad was actually born in America, correct?
Yeah. My dad grew up on 112th
Right.
and I think 2nd.
Spanish Harlem, I think you said. Right.
So he was kind of a street kid. My grandmother wasn't around. and my grandfather raised had two boys, and raised them. And my father kind of had to fight his way through. He won the quarterfinals of the Golden Gloves in 1952.
Oh, wow.
So so he was had a very brief amateur career. He had actually brought me down to the old PAL on Alexander Street.
I remember that. I've been there. Yes, years ago. Right.
So I think I trained for about 2 months, and I got tired of getting hit in the face. I just couldn't keep my hands up. Good group though, and I lasted about 2 months, and I figured this wasn't for me. So
well, it wasn't for you, but your politics is right. Just give me a brief. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm back for.
Well, let's talk about that, right? And that's one of the questions I was going to have for you. Why are you deciding to enter the the race for city council president?
All right. So as I stated earlier today, I have 30 years working in operations and finance. I have the last roughly 25 of those working within higher ed and K through 12. So I've had a lot of experience working with towns, governments, and school systems, and I think I have a lot to bring to the table here in Yonkers. I'm not a traditional politician. I'm not all that comfortable speaking in front of people, and I'm hoping my message gets out. But what I spoke about before, it's not about making the decisions in the beginning. It's really about what those decisions lead to. So we want to ensure that we're not, as I use the example of 10% versus 20% housing. I'm not against 20% housing, and I'm not for 10% housing. I'm for finding the right mix and
Right.
using the data. As I said, I grew up on Valentine Lane. That was an old Mitchell-Lama co-op. My parents had saved enough money that they could purchase a place. It wasn't expensive at the time, and their maintenance stayed fairly low.
Right.
So
and
I
I
think
just really quick, I want to touch on that, and because I like what you said. Like I said, I was there earlier when you were speaking, and I like that you said, I'm not saying 20% is the right number, right? And I touch on that because it's kind of an issue that has been talked about. I'm not saying 20% is the right number, but I'm also saying 10% is not the right number.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
And well, you really need. So, are you going to chase the developers away, or is there another way to do this with housing? Can you say, all right, fine, we're going to let you develop this piece of property over here. The affordable housing doesn't necessarily need to be there, or it could be a contribution to another piece. Remember, we're talking about affordable housing. We're not talking about so much housing for the poor. We're talking about that group of people that don't quite make enough to qualify for municipal housing, but make too much to qualify for municipal housing, but really can't find the right place to live. And I think we need to encourage more home ownership. Now, it may not necessarily be an actual home on a plot of property. It could be a co-op. It could be a condo. Amalgamated housing in the Bronx did some great things. I think they started out as union housing, but that was for the bring the folks into the neighborhood to work. And
I like that idea. I'm sorry not to cut you off, Ron. I like that idea. Encouraging people to become homeowners, right? I think I read somewhere where it said, part of attaining upward mobility, right, was purchasing a home. That was one of the first steps, right, to attaining, I guess, wealth. How do we encourage, and not only encourage, right? You can encourage someone, but they also need, the know-how, right, and access. How do we encourage and also give them the proper tools and knowledge to become homeowners?
So I'm actually going to delve back a little bit further into, or get a little bit further into the weeds here, but there's, and you might appreciate this. There's a line between equity and personal responsibility. So, teach a man to fish, and he eats for his life. So I think we've got to provide those skills, and then we've got to expect people to live up to their personal responsibility. I can't have an iPhone 12. I'll go out and have an iPhone 8 or an Android or whatever I can afford, and then I can take that $400 difference and I can put that in the bank.
Right, and I agree with you. Like you said, I think I can appreciate that. I do. I can appreciate financial responsibility, financial management. I know I've messed up my credit cards at one point. Cost me a lot of money, especially when we bought our first home. I had to pay a lot in my credit card. But again, I myself, and I take my example, growing up, I didn't have someone who was teaching me how to do that, right? And which is why I got into the credit card trouble in the first place, right? And so how do we, this is what and my point I guess I'm trying to get at is how do we teach, those who lack that skill, the financial management skill, so they can make those smart decisions?
So, Freddie, I'm not going to assume I know how old you are, but I'm going to figure out that you probably going through school, there might have been a course called home ec.
I maybe because I'm older, I don't remember.
Okay, so
because I'm getting old.
many public schools,
but I do know what you're talking about. Yes,
had a course called home ec.
Right.
That's kind of morphed into something a little different now, called family consumer science, and it's very broad depending on the school district, but you teach. So when I worked for Greenwich, we took out all of the kitchens. We had these kitchens and they taught home ec and you bake a cake. We morphed that into something that looked more like Hell's Kitchen, where you had a chef, a sous chef, and it became really a vocational to show what it meant to run a kitchen. They took away the sewing class and they looked at what it meant to design clothes and be able to see your vision move forward with that. I'm advocating that you add something onto that as well, which is, how do you save money? How do you bank? What does compound interest mean? You have a credit card and rather a mortgage, and you take a 30-year, you take a 15-year. So you have real simulations that teach people what the consequences of those decisions are. And you do it young enough that becomes ingrained.
I totally agree.
I think that's a perfect place in the Yonkers school system that you can bring that in, because those are life skills, and those are life skills that are just. It incorporates math, it incorporates all of those foundation skills that you learn, and then you bring that to the next level.
I agree. I got an MBA, and I'm not saying the smartest just because I got one, right? Because I don't necessarily someone who has an MBA, and I did the dual concentration in finance and marketing. I don't necessarily say getting an MBA or any master's degree or any degree is the right way. It's no right or wrong way. So, but I do agree with what you're saying. I do believe that we need to bring certain, classes, workshops, which is something I would love to do here in Yonkers in the summer, utilizing our center, is doing a financial management workshop, entrepreneurship workshop, right? That's what it sounds like that you were helping bring to these schools by, changing out the stoves to,
right. So
I guess professional stoves, right? That chefs could learn.
Yeah, I didn't handle the pedagogy. I handled the back end.
But you knew the reason why they were doing that, right? It was for that purpose, right?
But I knew what they wanted to develop. So
right.
I needed to know the plan so I can engage the architect to make sure that we were putting things in the right spot, we were using the right equipment. And I've been around education for so long, and you see how successful districts do this. And I'm not saying that Yonkers doesn't have the talent to do it. There's just so much on the plate that, it may not have come forward from the Board of Ed.
Right. And I like that you and you in speaking to you earlier, you mentioned that you build schools, right? So you have some familiarity with the school system, school districts, particularly one like Greenwich, right, where I'm sure they have amazing facilities. They're well resourced, right? Obviously there's a different financial status there. Well, and then you look at a school like Yonkers. I'm sorry, Yonkers Public Schools, right? How will you bring that experience? And I know you're not necessarily involved in all the logistics of the school system there, but in what you've seen maybe, and in being in that situation, how would you plan on bringing that to Yonkers and maybe improving the schools and implementing some of the things you just spoke about? So
one of the things at Greenwich was very careful with their money. Their tax rates are low comparative to the house values. You can drive through Greenwich and you can drive through Yonkers, and you can immediately see a difference just on how your car glides along the roads. So there's a certain amount, and I was very lucky. My budget never got cut because they knew how important it was to make sure you were maintaining schools. Greenwich lost 2 schools in the mid 2000s to mold. They didn't put the money into the schools when they needed to. They had leaks. There wasn't an appetite to raise taxes, and that wound up 2 schools needed to be rebuilt because mold was pervasive through both schools. Yonkers has a similar problem. Yonkers has not maintained their schools in decades, and a lot of it has to do with, I believe it's 73%. I'm going to be off a couple of percentage here, but about 73% of the school district is economically disadvantaged. And that means that a large portion of the Yonkers population is sending their children to private schools.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello. Oh, I'm sorry, Ron. Yeah, no, I put you on mute just so we don't get that. There's kind of I guess some delay anyway, but that's the reason I had you on mute. But no, I agree. And you mentioning, and we're going into, I guess, the finance and school budgeting and stuff like that, right? And obviously, there's different budgets. And what you mentioned, a large population of the students that go to Yonkers public schools, their parents maybe are not contributing the same. And not to say that in a negative way. I mean, in terms of taxes, meaning and money that flows in. Is that what you? Go ahead,
Fred. Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm so contributing to Yonkers and taxes is not where I'm going with this, because education is about equity. Education is not about equality.
Right.
Every student deserves and I know this.
I agree. I'm not to cut you off.
I'm not saying that what I am saying is that it's not been popular decisions to put money into the schools because of all of the other needs of Yonkers.
Right.
And we've not done that. If you recall, back in 2015, we had a $56 million hole in the Yonkers school budget because somebody on the school board, somebody in the school district had booked revenue, grant revenue that didn't appear for 2 years. And they didn't correct it after the first year when it was 26 million. And then when we went up to about 56 million, we realized that there was a problem. I believe that superintendent was let go since then. And it wasn't the superintendent who did it. It was the lack of having a school business administrator, school business district leader certified in the district.
Right. And obviously, since then, Dr. KHADER has, worked hard to improve the schools. Right. And I think a lot of people would agree that he's done a good job so far. But there's always still that, complaint about that there could be more done. And I'm, like you, I've seen school districts that have just amazing, resources, amazing funding. And they have some things that they offer to their students that you just would not believe. Right.
So
and,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'll let you go. Go.
So we spend about $24,000 a student, and on first blush, excuse me, that sounds like it's a lot of money.
Actually, it's not. I've worked at a school. I'm sorry not to cut you off, where they were giving us $36,000 per student, so it's low.
So White Plains spends 32. New Rochelle spends about 29. Even Syracuse, who we complain all the time, we're only getting about 50% state aid. And Syracuse gets 80. Syracuse spends $22,000, which is only $2,000 less than us, but it's 48% cheaper.
Right.
Most of our teachers are on top tier here, so a lot of it has to do with the teachers make a lot of money.
Right.
We mitigate that somewhat by class size. There are, I believe, 30 students in a class in many of the classes here in Yonkers schools, and unfortunately, the students who I know this because I was a student who misbehaved. The student who misbehaves gets all the attention. Some students kind of shrink away, and when you have that many students in a class. So
you're saying that we need to reduce the class size. Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry.
Well, we need to reduce the class size,
and reduce. I'm sorry, that's good. And reducing class sizes, that would mean that we need to expand or bring on more teachers, right? And then have more classrooms to be able to do so. Correct.
So again, I'm not going to be an expert on pedagogy. So there are ways to lever how we use teachers and what we do with students. So we don't really have a real digital learning program here in Yonkers. I certainly advocate that we should have one device per student, not one device per family. And if you had one device per student, there are programs that when teachers make assignments, they're able to look in and see how the student is doing. So it is a lot of training is needed on the teacher side to get that class size down, because you don't always have to be in class, but you always have to be engaged. So some of these learning doesn't have to happen in a classroom. It can happen in what you might call a multi-purpose room, where students are given assignments and then teachers are able to look into those assignments. So it's not quite a Zoom program at home,
Right.
but it's something similar to that within
They would be in school still in the same
within
right.
school, where you can, and it would almost be like each student is getting their own IEP.
And I agree with the need to reduce the classroom size. I definitely do agree, and I also agree that the oil wheel gets the no, I'm sorry, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? That's the saying, and in this case it'd be the troublemakers, right? I remember I used to get in a little bit of trouble at School 16 back on North Broadway there, and I would get a lot of attention. I would actually go to the principal's office, and we used to like it because we would watch sports bloopers. I don't know if you remember that show, right? And that's what we did when we got in trouble. So it wasn't a bad thing for us, but yeah, I agree. We do need to reduce the classroom sizes. I'm not sure how that would work in terms of the devices and putting a kid in a student actually in a multi-purpose room without I do appreciate the engagement of teachers, and I think that this pandemic has shown us how much social engagement and interaction with the teacher is really valued, and it's really important, extremely. But I also understand the importance of great teachers, right? And so we need to somehow figure out how to reduce the classroom sizes without I guess reducing the contact with teacher and student. And that's what I think. So
and I'm not claiming to be a pedagogical expert on this. I mean, there are really smart people out there. I only have the experience to understand a good plan or a bad plan. So I'm not saying that I'm going to sit there on the council, because that wouldn't be my job to formulate an education plan, but I would be able to understand what they're trying to accomplish and whether or not the outcome would be substantial or not.
Right. And maybe we could hire more teachers. Right. Is that a possibility? Maybe if we find where we can get more money, right? Because I'm just going to just lead into my next question. I was going over the city employee salaries, right? In the city of Yonkers website there, and wow, Yonkers Yonkers pays well. I mean, if you want to make over six-figure salary, right, come to Yonkers. I mean, everything pays over six-figure salary here, and I was just noticing some of the positions and how much they were making, and I don't know if they were warranted, those salaries. For example, there was one salary, it was $271,000, and it was someone who investigated arson. I mean, how many fires are there, and what are they really doing for $271,000? I mean, is there a lot of arson going on in Yonkers? I mean, I know the business, and I don't see that many fires happening in Yonkers. But even if there were, I mean, and then you go, and it seemed like an average number was like 192, 174, 174, 192, and I just saw how extremely high these salaries were, and some of the positions were garbage collector, not to insult. It was a environmental maintenance worker, and just regular police officer, not a lieutenant, not a sergeant. It didn't seem like the salary was justified. So can we cut some stuff there? Yeah, would you be interested in doing something like that if you were elected?
Yonkers has the highest municipal payroll outside of New York City. And Yonkers also has the largest overtime commitment outside of New York City. So part of it is looking at what the right size is for an organization. So if you assign overtime, it may or may not be needed. If it's needed, maybe you need to hire additional folks. When you pay overtime, again, it's time and a half. when you hire another body, you have about 49% additional expense in benefits, fringe benefits, because you're talking about a union job. You're talking about additional taxes. So you really have to get the right mix. Are there enough firefighters in the city of Yonkers?
And look, make no mistake, Ron. I'm not. I don't want no police pulling me over now, or the firemen not coming to the home when it's on fire. I'm not complaining. We absolutely need police. We absolutely need firemen. They're very important. They're very brave. They put their lives on the line. Absolutely. But I'm just my point that I guess I'm trying to make, and you being a having an analytical background, will you be willing to go over that and maybe see where there could be some cost reduction, right?
So the deep dive, and here's what I bring is I've run a department. My last department was 258 people when I worked for City University of New York. When I worked down in Texas, I had over 300 people working for me. When I worked at St. John's, I had over 300 people working for me. So the idea is to take that and understand whether you've got the right amount of folks working. For instance, let's just talk on custodial. Somebody's able to clean an office, 40,000 square feet of office space in an 8-hour shift. So do you have the right amount of people, or are you adding? Do you have the right amount of people for people who call out sick? I ran an engineering crew who worked on high pressure steam. High pressure steam, you need face-to-face relief. So if you could wind up with large overtime budgets if you don't have enough people or can move people around based on union contract. So you need to look at the contracts, see where the people belong, whether we have enough. There's another thing that I see we do here is police officers work highway patrol, if you will, or traffic control when Con Ed is out doing some work or they're out digging. Now,
it's Con Ed paying for that, by the way, and how?
I don't know. That's worth looking for. And is that adding on to the adding on to the pension as well?
Because I know if you're doing overtime and you're doing some overnight stuff as a cop, and and Con Ed is installing whatever, or even Verizon, right, fiber optics or whatever, the city's obviously paying that overtime, but is the company's compensating the city and taxpayer for that.
And they could be billing back to the company, but then there's also a pension liability at the end of that. So, somebody is going to be able to add that onto their pension some years later, and there's a cost.
Right. So maybe we should add that cost also to what the company's
so I'll tell you, and again, you're an MBA, so net present value, how much that cost is. You figure out what the additional is if you're putting it in today's dollars, paying out over 20 years, years from now.
And maybe that's what we need in city council, right? Maybe we need someone who understands that process and how to analyze and knows numbers and can tighten it up, right? Be more efficient and less wasteful.
So there are other options for that as well. So I'll give you an example what Greenwich does. Greenwich doesn't use their current officers to do that traffic work. What Greenwich does, and again, this may take some input from New York State, but what Greenwich does is they say, okay, you're retired, put your name on a list if you want to work. The pay is $75 an hour, and we'll put you out on the road. They're not adding to the pension because the person's already retired. They're assumed to still have their peace officer status, and they're making a little extra money while they're in retirement. So I think that works out for the rank and file, because maybe they're not going to get that overtime now, but when they're retired, they'll get it later. So there are also other ways to look at this, and I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that's the solution, but you need to kind of turn things upside down and see if there's another way to look at it and another solution, rather than just saying we either hire more or have more overtime.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that maybe, I'm getting this sense like there's this whole new shift happening in Yonkers politics, right? There's this wave coming, and I like it. It's a positive thing, and I think that there are people here now who kind of want to say, hey, let's just go through everything that's been happening and kind of see where we can improve. Why haven't we been able to improve for so many years, right? Because we have this long history of some negative history with the Yonkers politics, and some will say still going on to this day. So how do you view some of that stuff? And not to get negative, right? But how do you view that? Will you see some of that stuff as a kind of like a wall, a barrier or an obstacle, so to speak, for you in getting things done if elected as city council president?
Well, so I think the more voices in the chorus, the better. And sometimes those voices may not be all singing on key, but it's really important to listen to the voices. I started this journey back in March, in the beginning of March, and I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of people. Jimmy Nolan, I didn't know Jimmy Nolan before. I had a chance to meet him. I met another young woman, Maddie Cheatham Walker. She cares very much for the homeless. So I've gotten a chance to meet her. I met one time Prince Robinson doing a peace walk. So these are people I normally wouldn't have come in contact with, and my job is to listen. I may not share political viewpoints with them, or I may share political viewpoints with them, but it's important to listen. It's important to hear the different voices. And you, I met you through Catherine, and it's good to kind of have all of that input.
Yeah, and you mentioned that. That was one thing that you mentioned to me earlier. That you want to listen to people, right?
Well,
you want to hear.
Right. I look. I don't have all the answers, and during an earlier conversation we had, I'm not an ideologue. My opinions will change if somebody can give me good data or good facts that says, these people are getting hurt this way, or there's a majority of the people who feel this way, and maybe it's right, maybe it's not. I said it earlier today's meeting. Good ideas lead to great outcomes. And it's not as though they're Republican or Democrat, but you're worried about what happens after the idea has been implemented.
Right. And yes, and you did say that, right? It's not a partisan thing, right?
Right.
You want to just get the job done. And I do have to go to just bring that up. And I just actually found this out today. You actually led the charge. I don't say led the charge, but made, I guess, the city council aware of some stuff with Mike KHADER that led to the possible investigation, right?
Well,
and I just want to ask you, and I get it. Listen, hey, Ron, if there's anything going on, right, and with any of the candidates, or any of the politicians, any political leader, whether in the Westchester County, city, state, wherever, we want to expose that. We want to hold them accountable. We definitely want to hold any investigation that may be needed. But you actually brought that to the attention to the council, and who then voted on moving forward with the investigation, or at least requesting that Liam, the inspector general, I'm sorry,
right. So
do an investigation.
I actually read an article on the Yonkers Tribune. I think I don't recall if Hezi had written it. You're familiar with Hezi?
Yes.
I don't know if Hezi wrote it or it was an op-ed. There was a couple. There was one concerning an employee, and then a few days later, this came out regarding the a possible quid pro quo. And I'm gonna say that anybody is assumed innocent, and we're not saying that the incumbent has done anything wrong, but there was an allegation, and where there's an allegation, it deserves to be investigated. Right. I looked at the city charter, and I didn't ask that Liam investigate. I felt that the council had the authority to hold a hearing, and a hearing I felt could be pretty quick. I really wanted everything to be done prior to the primary.
Yeah, I don't know if that was going to happen.
Well, all that has to happen is,
right.
These are the rent checks. I paid my rent, or
right.
This is my landlord, and we're doing like in kind, whatever it is.
Right.
And it could be.
And I don't want to get negative, and I think with the you and the incumbent spoke earlier, and I think what it was, it's just a matter of why now, right? This is not something that was really recent, as in the and also why not other allegations that were made on the Yonkers Tribune, right? And I think that was the kind of that's the argument. Why not also? There's so many allegations. I mean, there's so many people that we could get into, and not to get negative, but why now, and it just seems like it may be a targeted thing. And I don't want, and I'm not saying that's what you are, Ron, because in speaking with you, you seem like a very good guy.
So let me, first off, I didn't make the allegation. The allegation.
No, you did not. You did not make the allegation.
Up in the Tribune.
Where there's many allegations, right? The guy Hezi, I believe, he's all about allegations.
So I wanted, look, I want to have an exchange of ideas.
Right.
I believe at the end of the day, there's going to be 3 people in the race, depending on the Democratic outcome. But I believe Mike and Laskisha will still be in the race. I want to have a spirited debate. I think the 3 of us have different visions for Yonkers. In some instances, we may intersect. I'd like to get these allegations, this cloud of smoke, done. I don't really even want to talk about it at this point.
No, I understand. I didn't want to bring it up. Also, it's not to get into it too deeply, but you did talk about getting things done on a partisan basis, right? But I think
I actually want to get things done on a nonpartisan basis.
I'm sorry, not a nonpartisan basis, right? You want to work together. I'm sorry, that my mistake. You want to work both sides of the aisle, right? And I think that, and before you come in and you're already kind of. Seems like there's a little bit of already hostility. So I just didn't understand why you would, lead that charge. But there's a lot of allegations that could be made about everyone. And like I said, you want to move on. Let's just move on because I don't want to.
It's not that I want to get the allegations finished and really get to the meat and potatoes of campaigning. I don't want this to be about somebody's perceived malfeasance or not. I want the election to be about, hey, here's my vision for Yonkers.
Right.
Here's what I'd like to see. I want to build these bridges. And, you tell me what you've done over the last 4 years, and we'll decide whether you've accomplished anything. And that's basically it.
Right. And that's what it should be about, right? Because, and I only bring it up also because there's been so much of it going on, and I'm not saying anything, even you involved in any of this. There's other things that have, there's just been so much involved, and mudslinging, even in racial undertones, and some of the things that have been mentioned about the candidate. And like you just said, let's focus on the issue. Everyone should focus on the issue, because if we're going to make, if people are going to make allegations or request investigations be had against political leaders, there are a lot of investigations that should be had. So I think we should just keep it to the issue, right?
I really want to talk about records. I want to talk about
absolutely
the 22% increase in borrowing that Yonkers experienced.
Why don't we talk about it? Okay. So let's talk about the 22% increase that Yonkers experienced in borrowing. Go ahead. So,
we're a little bit out of control here, and if we're not careful, we're, no offense to Mount Vernon, but we may wind up like Mount Vernon. We've got 22% increase in borrowing. We've been cited by DiNapoli, the controller, that some of our we've borrowed too much over the last few years. Moody's has downgraded us twice.
Wow.
2019 and most recently just this January. So it costs us more money to borrow when our bonds are downgraded.
Right. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, go ahead. I'll let you finish and then I'll ask. Go ahead.
No. So I'm saying, it costs us more money. I believe, and I haven't looked of late, but a couple months ago when I looked, our debt service was $85 million a year. That means it's great. And again, I don't have all the answers, but when we're borrowing money, that $85 million comes from somewhere. It comes from the tax levy, and that's money that we can't spend in the schools. That's money. We borrowed $5 million for books last year because we just didn't have the money to pay for books.
Right. And who's taxed, right? And again, I'm learning a lot also. And who's taxed with overseeing some of the stuff that you mentioned? Who would be the people involved in this current, let's say, from the current politician, administration or council now? Who would be tasked with overseeing this?
So the executive branch presents a budget to the legislative branch, which is the council, and the council can approve, disapprove, ask questions on that budget. Everybody's very happy this year because there's no tax increase.
Right. And Mr. Moranti, I believe that's one of the things he mentioned today when he spoke at the event. And what do you say about that? The 0%?
Well, there's I think we have 2 years where we're fine because we're getting the aid based on COVID and based on the state. But that's only 2 years. So we're hiring 34 more people on the city side. We're hiring about 150. I really have to check that number, but about 150 on the school side, which is well needed. Again, we don't have enough guidance counselors.
Yeah,
We don't have enough social workers, and those are your first line of defense against school shootings, bullying, and all of the other bad things that happen in school. So those are the positions we really need.
absolutely.
But
That I
again,
agree with. I'm married to a social worker. I have to
okay.
agree with you
Well,
with
no,
that, Brian.
yeah, that's
But I do.
whenever we, I came, I was working in Greenwich when Sandy Hook took place. And, one of the things that we looked to do after that was making sure that we had the right people in the right spots. I mean, we unfortunately around the same time had a student commit suicide from bullying. So it's really important that
Yeah.
social workers and guidance counselors are able to get a handle on what's happening in the schools and the mental well-being of the students.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And when Tasha Diaz, Councilwoman Tasha Diaz, spoke about that a few council meetings ago, she got up and she mentioned that they had allocated some money there in the budget to specifically to hire more social workers and counselors. I thought that was a great thing.
No, I think so
I
as well.
loved it.
And I get to meet a lot of people now out on the campaign trail. And I think Tasha's great.
Yeah, she is. She's very passionate.
Very
Passionate.
She's got one of the thickest spines I've ever seen because she'll stand up to anybody.
Oh no, I see it. I believe it. I see it, and that's kind of what I appreciate about her. I like the passion, the energy, and I see her a lot in the community. Actually, I drive through Riverdale a lot on my way to Gino's Pizza, my favorite pizza place.
That's on South Broadway, right?
Yes, on South Broadway. There, even though I shouldn't eat the pizza, the sauce is not really doesn't do me good when I go to bed at night.
When the old Park Hill movie theater was there.
Yes, that was where I went to see Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan.
Okay.
That was a long time. It was in the 80s. I'm not that old, but it was in the 80s. But yes, so I see Tasha in the community a lot. She's there, giving out food, feeding Westchester. She did something with it's a business, No Limit PCNY Auto Body. They have tractor trailers full of food, right? And I love seeing the things in the community. If elected, and even if not elected, right? You don't have to be elected to participate in community service.
No, absolutely not.
What are some of your plans in terms of community service?
Well, currently I'm on the board of the YMCA, which the Y was very important to me. My father had a stroke when I was 16, and he got himself back in shape going to the Y. I mean, he still had trouble speaking and couldn't work, but physically he was going down there lifting weights, and he had a group to hang out with. So that the Y, and I think there's a lot of those community centers. I'd like to work more with West Hab, which I haven't gotten a chance to do. But I think they really provide some solutions with the housing within. And I think if I'm elected, I can make a positive impact by making sure that we have funding in the right place. If I'm not elected, I'm still going to keep links to the folks that I've met, like Maddie Cheatham Walker, you, and other people in the community that we can make some differences where possible.
Absolutely, it's very important. The grassroots organizers, the community leaders, community activists, they play a big role, an important role here in the city. And I know Maddie, she's also another one who's very passionate about community service and is constantly visible out in the community. And the Y is definitely the YMCA, the YWCA. They both play an important role here in the community. My wife actually has worked for both, has ran teen programs at both. And she actually the gym there, which was very it's fairly priced. It's very cheap. So anyone looking for a gym membership, but doesn't want to pay these outrageous gym prices, go to the Y. They have a great gym there. My wife went there after my first child, and that's where she lost the weight for the first child. So it was very important for us too. So, but
the only indoor pool. I think
yes,
it's the only indoor pool.
And they recently just got some funding, I believe, for the pool and to do some renovations there, which I believe they'll be opening up here soon, if it's not already open. But it's great. I think programs like that are excellent. I know the team programs that my wife did were so important and they were lasting, or they created lasting relationships, right? Actually, one of the assistant teachers at our little prodigies was one of the teens at my wife's one of the programs she ran. So for us, we know how important it is, and we believe that whoever is elected or whoever's in there now, it's important that, and I see some of them, that they stay connected to the communities, and I should say the community organizations and the people in the community, and really make it a priority to help them grow and flourish. Just, especially the ones really that are out there doing a lot. So really quick, Ron, I do want to get to some people that are on here. Maddie is one of them. She said, "Good evening, Freddie." She said, "Hey, Ron." There you go. You can say hi to Maddie.
Or you can't see my hand waving. There we go.
Hi, Maddie. Thank you for watching. And like I said, Maddie's very active in the community. She's very visible. She's want to say hello. She's a consistent watcher. I appreciate that, Maddie. Thank you. I have Steve and Stimson. Steve.
Yeah, I met Steve. I met Steve on the campaign trail. So
yes, Steve is a good guy. Met him and Tim Hodges not too long ago. I really like what they had to say. Also, really good guys. Just I get the vibe, and I try not to be negative, right? And I don't want to go negative with their Ron, but these are some things that I just, I've asked questions, just not to for any reason.
You're interviewing Freddie, so
but I definitely, I like to get out there. But I want to, shout the people out. I hear someone here, Liz. He's saying, open more schools, more teachers, more teacher assistants, more after-school programs, mentor programs, and in multi-languages. What do you say about that?
Well, so right now we're about 4,500 seats short in Yonkers Public Schools. There's a plan. I'm on the Yonkers School Construction Board, and we have a plan. We've purchased the old St. Denis School. There are concept plans. They're not fully developed yet. There are concept plans to build, I believe, a 600-student school.
Really?
on McLean Avenue. It's McLean, Radford, Randolph, and then Cortlandt Park Avenue.
Wow, that's interesting. The St. Denis building, where's that located? The old St. Denis?
McLean Avenue between Radford and Randolph.
Okay. Is that near just Central Ave, the Thruway? Is that?
So do you know where Pelton Field is?
Yes.
Right. So it's if you come down the hill where Pelton Field's on the left.
Yes.
And you go about 3 or 4 more blocks past McLean Avenue.
Yes. Okay.
Station. There's the Pizza Barn that's got the
the big pizza. I think they moved location recently. Shout out to Pizza Barn on your huge slices. They really became famous.
I grew up in that. That's the neighborhood. I grew up.
Have you had one of them?
I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of friends over that area. So.
Have you had a huge slice from Pizza Barn?
Not within the last, I would say 8 years, maybe.
Yeah, Pizza Barn's pretty good. I always usually go to Gino's. I like Gino's a lot, but that's great hearing that they're actually thinking about building.
Dom and Vinny's is my favorite. Pizza.
Dom and Vinny's. Shout out to Dom and Vinny's.
If we're plugging.
Shout out to no, I'm not really. No, I go to Gino's all the time. I do. My wife says I need to stop. She says you wake up in the middle of the night all the time with I get acid reflux, right? But it's so good.
Me too. I'm on. So take some Nexium.
Yeah, yes, I shouldn't eat it. Period. But it's quick and easy. I'm always on the go. But no, I like.
You like weigh 10 pounds.
Well, I'm actually it's 9.5, but I'm trying to get to 10.
How do you keep the weight off eating pizza?
I'm married. Are you married?
I'm married.
Maybe you should married to.
I'm constantly in and out of. I'm constantly in and out of keto. So
no, but I want to go back to the school you said. So that they think there's a an idea or some plans there of building a 600-student school. I want to hear more about that, Ron, because that's very.
Well, actually, it's a great school. There's a health center in the school. It's
really
what we're calling a community school.
Oh, nice. Explain that. Community school. What do you mean by that?
Well, it has a lot of, so after school, there's a gym portion, which the school can be closed off. The gym can be open for the community. It's large enough to have regulation basketball games in there. There's also, as I said, there's a health center, dental, optometrist, all of those things that the students or the community actually, because remember, we bus, so you're not necessarily in the school. That's the disadvantage about having to bus, because the school becomes such an anchor of the community that parents can get to the school easy.
Right. And that's why my wife and I we talk about that a lot. And how there shouldn't be a difference between the schools, right? Parents shouldn't have to, have three choices, right? They should be able to get their child in the school that they want to. And I get why, right? We want to integrate and mix things around, but also we have that, what you just said, right? The school becomes the anchor of the community. And, if for some people, they feel that comfort of going to that one school, it's close to their neighborhood, but it's also to have to choose. Do I go to the school near me, but it's not the greatest school, so how do we balance that?
Well, again, we haven't made the investments in this, circling back to the original part of our conversation.
Right.
We haven't made the investments over the years in the school, and we have deferred maintenance. It's like, you pay the minimum amount on your credit card, but you still go charging on your credit card. And at the end of the day, you've got this huge debt that you just don't see how you get underwater.
Right.
And that's where we are. That's where we are with the conditions of our schools today. And I'm not criticizing John Carr, who manages the schools, and I'm not criticizing his staff, because you can only do so much with the money you're given. And this goes back to saying that Yonkers really hasn't gotten its fair share from Albany. We've only gotten 50%. Other schools are getting 80 and 90% reimbursement. They go by the grand list. So they look at the taxes that all the houses pay and what the houses are worth. And they say, okay, Yonkers, your houses are worth a lot. Well, our houses are worth a lot because we're located in Westchester County.
Right.
We still get close to our statutory taxing authority, as well as the implied taxing authority. When you look at Eastchester, which is right next door to Yonkers or Hastings, you start bumping up against that. We also pay 16.6% of our New York State tax as a Yonkers income tax. The only other city or municipality in the state is New York City that has an income tax. But we have an income tax of every one of our residents. We pay a tax when we buy a house. We pay a tax when we sell a house. I was at a block party today, and somebody said to me, and it's unfortunate, I'd leave if I didn't have to pay a tax to leave. So we're holding a house, but we don't want people to want to leave. We want people to stay here. We want Yonkers to be a destination.
Right. I was actually told to leave by an accountant. I've been told to leave.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody in City Hall told you to leave.
No. I was going to get to that. I actually been told to leave by people also now recently. I'm waiting for the retaliation. I don't know why. Why is that, Ron? Why do you think people are warning me? Do you have a clue?
I don't want you to leave, but
I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. I've left and I'm back.
I love Yonkers, and I think Yonkers has really developed well. I remember when I was a kid, Yonkers really had a bad reputation between the police, and I'm talking about, we're going back to the 1970s. I'm not talking about anything recent. And I think it's really changed. It's not this stuck in time city anymore. But if we can fix the schools, people would come here. The property values would go up. We'd have some additional revenue to put into places like South Yonkers, Ludlow, down in Larkin Plaza, in those areas. I mean, we are building up Larkin Plaza, but without it still feels a little sterile and not family friendly. Right. The Vanderdunk Park, I went down there one evening just to watch. Maddie had mentioned about the homeless. I was on with Rue one day, and Maddie had a comment about the homeless list. So I went down at night to see what was happening. And you have human beings defecating in the park. I'm not blaming them. We just don't have the service.
Right. And that's the problem.
It's not Joe Smith with his 3 kids. These are people who are mentally ill. And, we have to work closely with the county to solve these problems, because Yonkers doesn't have the infrastructure to solve these problems. Right. And they come from the, we need the health department to help us with this.
I agree that Yonkers needs help with with the homeless problem. It definitely needs to be addressed, but Yonkers needs help. And you know what? You bring up a good point. It's like, why are they, it's always Yonkers needs to do it. Yonkers. But homelessness is a big problem, a nationwide problem, right? And I think that it should be, tackled by the state, the federal and the, local city governments. It's not just a Yonkers problem, even though you may, the homeless person may be in Yonkers, right? I don't see how it's just always Yonkers that has.
No, and it's not. If you remember, New York City was exporting.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll pay the rent for a year if you go move to not just Yonkers. It was Mount Vernon. It was any place else.
It was all over the country. They were exporting.
And you're treating human beings like cattle at that point.
Well, Ron, I don't know if you saw the Yonkers Voice the other day. They found a homeless person dead in the parking lot of ShopRite on Prospect in Riverdale.
That was that a couple months ago, or is that a little?
No, that just happened maybe early this week, or maybe I may have just seen the video late. Maybe I'm blocked from Yonkers Voice, so I may have just seen the video late.
Boy, they just want you out of the city, don't they?
Oh yeah, but he attempted to come at me at one point, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, but he zoomed in, and it was the homeless gentleman there laid that I didn't even realize. I shared the video. I didn't realize that it was zoomed into the person, so I deleted it. But yeah, I mean, you're finding dead homeless people in the parking lot, shopping, grocery store parking lots. Families are going grocery shopping.
And look, some of these are addictions. Some of these are, as I said,
whatever they may be, whether it's drug addiction or it was freezing cold. I mean, obviously we're in summertime now, so it may have been, but I mean, it just should not be happening.
No, right? They're human beings. I said earlier, there's that line between equity and personal responsibility. And this is on the other side, where if somebody's not mentally capable of taking care of themselves, there is no personal responsibility. And that's when you get into the community has a responsibility. Right. And again, these are complicated issues.
Yeah, and I only bring it up, and they are very complicated issues, right? But they have to be brought up, especially to the candidates, those looking to become elected. You being, looking to become city council president. I don't know. I think that's, one of the top spots, and I think it's an important position. And the homelessness problem is definitely a serious problem that has to be addressed. And I mean, like, there's something active. I don't know. Is there, Ron? Maybe you're aware of things that are in, the process of happening, or they're thinking about.
I'm not aware of anything that's happening, and it's an unfortunate issue. I'm going to draw a parallel. We were so disgusted by what happened to George Floyd that it started a movement, hopefully a movement that continues, about police reform. And again, I'm not indicating any of that is happening here, but it talked about police reform. It talked about some criminal justice reform, some of which I'm behind, some of which I think we may have went too far. But it sparked a conversation. We need to get the homeless issue to spark a conversation where we can bring in our County Executive Latimer. We can bring in Ruth Walter, who's my representative here. Chris Johnson, who's a representative, he was at our meeting, earlier today. We need to be able to bring these representatives to the table and say, look, help us. We're the largest city in your county, and we need your help with this homeless problem. There are human beings who need your help. So it's a countywide issue.
Absolutely right. And if you are elected, I hope that you're going to be on it. I hope that you're going to be after George Latimer.
I want to partner. I want to partner with my county colleagues.
Yes, I mean, because it has to absolutely be addressed. So I definitely would like to see someone really just having an answer or some idea of what we're going to possibly do, right? At least start to think about a plan, a solution, even if one is not being implemented, right? And I haven't heard much of that. And I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Republican Party. Hasn't had the best reputation recently, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with what people are saying. I'm don't have an opinion either way, right? I think it doesn't matter. Party does not, dictate who the person is at all. I like to consider myself apolitical if that's possible, right? But tell me, how do you plan or see, the Republican Party being able to reposition itself, right? With such negative, media coverage that it's received recently, specifically because of Trump's presidency. How do you, see the future of the Republican Party here in Yonkers specifically?
So again, I'm not running for a federal or a state office. I'm running local here.
It affects it though, right? And the people here.
I understand. So there are some people who thought President Trump was great. I said this earlier on Ruse. I appreciate some of the policies. I think some of the policies that were put through were beneficial for the country. I'm not a fan of the way he did things, and I'm not really.
I'm sorry, Ron. I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm not. This is not anything about Trump. I'm not even. I don't even care about Trump. My point is just the I guess the impression that his candidacy has left. Has left on the Republican Party, and because of it, you may be viewed negatively, right?
And look, I'm starting. In some people's mind, I'm starting at -2 versus starting at 0. I'm gonna quote Ed Koch here. Ed Koch said, "If you like 9 out of 12 items or 9 out of 12 of my positions, vote for me. If you like 12 out of 12 of my positions, seek psychiatric help." So that's really where I am. I'm gonna put forth my vision for Yonkers. I'm gonna put forth my vision for Yonkers and taking our resources and trying to best utilize those resources to help the broadest number of people.
Ron, I like that answer, right? Because, and that's the point, I guess, right? I want to make. It's not about party. It's about the person and what they stand for and what they're looking to do if elected, right? That's what I agree. Let's focus on the issue. All of Yonkers, all politicians, let's focus on the issue. And Ron, I just want to allow you the opportunity to talk about that. Before we go, let them know who Ron Matten is and what he's going to do if elected to city council president. I want to hear you. Go ahead, Ron.
So what I want to build bridges between the council and the executive branch. We've got a fractured council today. We don't have a lot of communication between the council and the executive branch. You could see that maybe now that they're back in chamber, things will work a little better. I want to look at the outcomes. I don't want to just make decisions based on, hey, it sounds good that we have 20% housing. I want to see what we can still keep developers engaged in, how we can maintain the quality of life. Look, it doesn't do us any good to build up an area that we gentrified and then we have more homeless, because eventually that will not be gentrified anymore. We've had a lot of construction that hasn't really sat well with local communities. I live over here in Colonial Heights, down on Central Park Avenue. There's some construction that just stopped and it makes the place look terrible. There's the FedEx, or rather the UPS distribution center that they put on Tuckahoe. That doesn't belong there. So there are these quality of life issues. I want to make sure that that the communities have been heard before we move forward. So I hope you give me a chance to get my vision out there over the next couple of months, and I hope that the folks here share with me on what they need, so together we can work.
That's Ron Matten, everybody. Democrat. I'm sorry, not Democrat. It has so many Democrats. Republican candidate for Yonkers City Council president. If you like what Ron has to say and you believe in Ron, then go vote for Ron, right? What I ask all of Yonkers to do, those that are going to vote, is to learn about each and every candidate. Forget what party they represent. Some people are flip-flopping parties anyway. Does it matter, does it? Look at what they've done, look at their track record, and look at what or hear what they are looking to do moving forward, because that's what matters, the issues. Ron, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.
Freddie, thank you for having me.
And like I said, we met a couple times. Today we got to talk a little bit more. And I say you're a good guy. You know, in my book, I got good energy from you. I appreciate your time today, Ron. Good luck with everything, and I'll see you out there on the campaign.
All right.
Take care. Freddie. Have a good one. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Ron Matten, Republican candidate for Yonkers City Council president. Yeah, if you like what he had to say, the choice is yours, not mine. It's not my opinion. It's what the candidates are saying. It's what they're doing that matters most. So all the mudslinging, let's cut it out, because we all can find something on anyone. That's just life, right? So let's focus on the issues. That's what matters most, the issues, and getting them done, making an impact. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Freddy Vazquez. This is Basement Politics. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next Sunday. Enjoy your week. Basement Politics with Freddy Vazquez. Join me next week, June 13th, Sunday, as Christopher Johnson, Westchester County Legislator, District 16, joins me right here in the basement. I'm hoping to get Annette Yarber. Annette Yarber, hopefully we'll schedule her soon. Laskisha, I'm waiting for the email. Everybody have a good night. Enjoy your week. May you all be blessed. And remember, vote on the issues.